How to make 60 million from free serviced accommodation properties. Hi guys, my name is Wayne Quinton. I just want to talk to you about how you can make 60 million from free serviced accommodation properties. When you buy an asset, as you know, there are 4 profit levers. I know you know that, most of you, but let's work through this together so we can get clear on them. What is profit lever number 1? Well, profit lever number 1 is, say it out loud, profit lever number 1 is discount. That's right, it's discount, okay? This is for any strategy, by the way. We've already looked at family let on another video. In this video, we're going to look at it for serviced accommodation. So, profit lever number 2 is, come on, say it out loud. Profit lever number 2 is cash flow. Joining the team, say it out loud, because using your voice box locks it in. What's profit lever number 3? This is capital growth. Yes, capital growth, capital appreciation, right? And profit lever number 4 only works if 2 and 3 are both at the table. Both of them have to be at the table. So if you've got good cash flow because you put your rents up and you've got good capital growth, profit lever number 4 is refinance. The ability to refinance your property, release money and buy more properties. Okay, now we want this in any deal we do, ideally all 4 at the table. Now, if you're doing rent to service accommodation, you're creating awesome cash flow. 310 grand of cash flow per annum. Pretty awesome. I like it, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I've not got the discount. That belongs to the landlord. You've not got the capital growth. That belongs to the landlord. And you now don't have the ability to refinance. So I'm not saying don't do it. It's an awesome strategy to get you out of the rat race. If you sat there with you going, I hate my job, I want out, or I've got a gap in income, I need to fill it quick, right? Rent to serviced accommodation, brilliant. But if you own these babies, if you own them, you get all 4 profit levers at the table, not just one. Because it makes sense, yes? So let's assume we go and buy 3 properties to run as serviced accommodation. Now, just as a reminder, so we're all on the same page, I'm going to buy them and run them as serviced accommodation. There's a couple of things I've got in mind. I want to meet 7 C's, which we're going to cover today for serviced accommodation. However, also in my book, it needs to meet 6 C's for family let. Now that makes them harder to find because we're going to need to meet 2 sets of rules at the same time. Why am I saying that? The reason I'm saying that is because I believe if you buy SA right now, if you think about the serviced accommodation strategy, right now, let's say they make you 10,000 a month. As more and more people get in the market, and there's plenty of space for more people, by the way, but as more people get in and get in the market, at some point the supply and demand is going to be greater than the supply. It might drop £800 a month profit. As more people join in, it might drop to 600. As more people join in, it might drop to 400. And at some point you might say, do you know what, for the extra time it takes to run these, I may as well switch it back to buy to let and just run it as a buy to let. Does that make sense so far, what I've just said? So we're going to have a look around. Yeah, great. So when do you think it'll happen? Realistically, I always say 8 to 15 years. I think it'll be 12 to 15, but let's plan on it just in case it's 8. So 8 to 15 years from now, I think you'll start to hit a point where SA may not be as profitable as it is now. I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't tell you when it might be. 25 years, maybe. But if that's the case, I'm going to own my properties like you are for the next 50 years, and then your kids are going to own them as a legacy. We need to work as a family let when I give up the SA, yeah? When I switch it back to family lets, that's why I wanted to meet both sets of rules, okay? Now, providing it meets both sets of rules, let's have a look at this scenario. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to assume that each of you is going to live another 40 years. Now, I might be wrong. Hopefully some of you are going to live longer than that, and for those which are planning to die sooner, I hope you're not. But if your kids will be alive for the next 40 years, or whoever inherits these from you, right? So let's have a look at the maths on the next 40 years. Discount, let's assume we get none. Worst case, let's buy them for full price and get in the game rather than not. Now, I don't want you to do that. I want you to get the discount, but let's assume we bought them with no discount. We still got in on the game, right? We've now got 3 of these properties, but each are making us £10,000 per annum. Now actually, when you own it, because the mortgage is cheaper than renting, it actually makes £12,000 per annum times 3. So that's £36,000 per annum of profit from your free serviced accommodation properties that you own. Now, for those of you with a calculator nearby, you might want one if you've not got one, or use your phone or whatever works for yourself. What is £36,000 a year times the next 40 years? Let's work that number out. How much cash flow profit will you make from these 3 properties over the next 40 years? If we keep running them as serviced accommodation, 36,000 times 40 years. By the way, I'm going to wait until we get a few answers. So that's right, 1,440,000, right, of cash flow profit over the rest of your lifetime. Let's say the next 40 years. Are they worth it? Yes, they are. And yes, now even if we drop back to family lets, the profit won't be anywhere near as much, but you've still got a lot. We'll come back to that in a bit, right? But let's look at the capital growth. On average, let's say these properties were 100 grand each. 100 grand on average over time. Property prices double every 8 years. We know that, but let's say it takes 10 years for easy numbers. So we've got 300 grand worth of property. What will that be worth in 10 years' time if it doubles? That's right, it'll be worth £600,000. 10 years after that, what will these properties be worth if it doubles again? 1.2 million between the 3. Now, people say, surely that's not going to quadruple in the next 20 years. Well, think back 20, 25 years. What was the house that you're living in now worth? 25 years ago, probably a quarter what it is now, right? This is what happens in the market. 10 years after that, £2.4 million. 10 years after that, say it out loud. What are these going to be worth? £4.8 million. If they're worth £4.8 million and you've got them for £300,000, that means you've had over £4.5 million of capital growth. your cash flow plus capital growth on these properties. These 3 properties is now £5.9 million over the next 40 years. I can't see you smiling. What's wrong with you? Right, do the numbers make sense? Big strong arm so I can check in and make sure it's making sense. Yeah, great, okay. So, by the way, this is the maths of family let, right? If you're not going to do serviced accommodation, please get some of something. Get free family lets. That's right, because even if the cash flow was only 300 grand, which it would be for free family let, that's still 300 grand, and it's still 4.8 million, and they haven't finished. We've forgotten about the refinance. Here's the thing, if you start with 3 houses now, how many of you know this math? But how many of you don't? It triples every 10 years. That's without putting another penny in. Without putting another penny in, if you get 3, it triples. Right, if you have free serviced accommodation, they'll pay with refinancing for you to get 9. Free serviced accommodation, get to 9. Free buy-to-lets, get to 9. It triples. So in 10 years' time, how many will we have? 9. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 27. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 81. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 243 properties. Yeah, 243. Now, if we assume that we're rubbish at this and Wayne's overestimated the capital growth and we turn it into 2.25 million, right? 2.25 million plus 1.4 million of cash flow, I'm going to say that's 3.5 million. I've been really cautious here. I've halved the equity growth. We know what happens, but we've halved it. And if we have half as many houses, in fact, let's half it again. We only end up with 60 houses. So I have a quarter of the ability to refinance it right through the time. I have half the equity growth, 60 lots of 3.5 million. In fact, 3.5 million was for 3 houses. I'm going to round it down to £1 million per house. 60 lots of £1 million, we're going to make 60 lots of £1 million, we're going to make £60 million over the next 40 years. 60 million for averages to 1.5 million a year. How much money did we start with? We needed to get 3 lots of 40 grand. Many of you have got that in the bank or in equity. Some of you have not. And you can go and be your own bank and find one person who will lend you 120 grand. Or 3 people with 40 grand each. And you, my friend, will make £60 million over the next 40 years. Obvious question, who'd like £60 million over the next 40 years by show of hands? Right, this is SA. This is serviced accommodation, right? But you've got to learn the skill. And then you've got to master it. And I've done my numbers down. I've quartered the refinance ability and I've halved the equity growth. So it could easily argue it'd be 8 times the results if you implement with precision. If you go at pace with precision and get this done. So if you're struggling with be your own bank, my friends, or if you're struggling to raise the money, try harder, right? Or try smarter, revisit the training. Go and look at it, because you can raise 120 grand and buy these babies. You're going to get that as well as the cash flow, which is amazing on its own. But as well as the cash flow, you're also going to get the capital growth, which is gigantic, and the ability to refinance. And that's where the massive profit is. So take a screenshot if you want. I'll finish that page, by the way, and I'll flip back in a minute to the rent one. If you want to grab a screenshot or photo of that, right? But the point I'm making to you is learning the skill of being your own bank if you haven't got the money, and then learning to implement with precision. That's the reward. That's the reward, finally taking the consistent action. That's the reward, my friends. If this is helpful, please subscribe, like. Thank you.